let's kick off this first afternoon session with the winners of the sport category. It was a mixed architecture team led by Grimshaw. It's the Parramatta Aquatic Centre in Australia. Please welcome Grimshaws. Hello.
Hi, my name's Andrew Burgess. I'm the Director of Andrew Burgess Architects. This project, the Parramatta Aquatic Centre, was a collaboration between my firm and Grimshaw Sydney office and McGregor Coxall also, and it was won through a design competition. I'd like to start by acknowledging the original custodians of the country on which this project is built, the Darug people. I think the kind of key for us was this idea of the social capital of the pool. How could we kind of look beyond the functional brief to design an aquatic centre that really kind of captured the kind of formative role that swimming plays in Australian culture today? The site is 25 kilometres west of central Sydney on a disused golf course. This sort of triangular sloping site, unusual site for an aquatic centre. Parramatta was one of the founding towns of colonial Australia, and so the site and the park adjacent to the site has UNESCO World Heritage status, which had a big outcome on the project. The site was part of the aquatic centre was part of a master plan, and it was necessitated by the demolition of a 1950s pool for a new stadium. This is Mays Hill, the location of the site. It had always functioned as a kind of viewing point, a place to see the emerging colonial town of Parramatta. And so it's built into its contemporary heritage character was retaining this kind of empty foreground seen in this early 1820s painting by Joseph Lycett, a convict painter, which is taken directly on the site, or painted directly on the site. When you look at the small-scale footprints within the park setting, you see the immediate scale challenge of the aquatic centre. Into this site of small-scale dotted pavilions, we had to place 10,000 square metres of parking and 15,000 square metres of aquatic centre program, which was completely at odds with both the heritage conditions of the site and the general character of the park setting. This was a design by another architect prior to the competition, which illustrates the immediate challenge of the kind of typical aquatic centre shed typology applied to the site. We knew we had to find another way of thinking about an aquatic centre. We looked at some of the early examples of swimming in Parramatta, particularly looking at the nature of enclosure and how we could resolve the challenge of the fence as a kind of, which breaks down the kind of continuity between park and pool. So we looked at some of these iconic harbour structures in Sydney, their delicate sense of enclosure, and how they create this kind of disguised enclosure or fence, in this case a shark net, whilst also kind of creating an element that's quite delicate but has multiple functions, disguising the fence. So our concept for the project was threefold: to create this delicate circular ring that defined the kind of a sunken court and indoor pools which were carved into the topography to minimise their presence within the site. And then a linear kind of buffer element as a gym that ran alongside the road and rail adjacent to the site. This was our early first model, trying to get that sort of delicate ring and that sunken court, which also contains the fence that separates park and pool. If you look at this survey of aquatic centres, you see some really kind of distinct orthodoxies in the type. These very kind of large shed-like structures, which are very separate and disconnected from their setting. We really wanted to look at a different type of aquatic centre that would be embedded in its site and sense of landscape. This is our site plan for the project. You can see the circular ring, the 50-metre pool within that sunken court as the kind of defining identity of the project. And because we've kind of reduced and sunk many of the programs, we were able to regenerate a lot of landscape, of local endangered woodland landscape on the site also. Parramatta itself experiences significant more heat than central Sydney, about 10 degrees hotter in summer. And so creating this infrastructure of cooling was another key part of the program. So we used rain gardens to create cooled public spaces. This shows the site plan, the plan with the 50-metre pool, 25-metre pool, kids learn to swim pool and kids play pool, and then a gymnasium as the key functions. The site has multiple points of entry, a pedestrian entry from the city, car park entry, and a larger bus stop entry. And then this very simple legibility that uses a circle to organise these large-scale programs, and then positioned at a kind of knuckle is the front desk that has a sight lines to all aspects of the project. Atypical compared to most Sydney aquatic centres is we really separated the airspace so that we could have very kind of comfortable spaces in most of the programs, rather than having all of things like cafes and gym entries in that kind of hot, humid environment of the pool hall. And we also used that strategy and the kind of geometry that we constructed to create separate acoustic environments also. Some elevations of the aquatic centre for the competition, and the development of that landscape palette. This is the site in its disused golf course, the beginnings of the circle emerging in the key programs, and the project as it was finished. This shows the network of pathways that link it into the site and extend beyond to connect into the future development of the master plan. This gives you a sense of the kind of key quality of trying to create much more of a cultural and community building rather than the typical kind of pragmatic spaces of aquatic centres. And another view of the entry. And the key organising element, particularly around the ETFE skylights, which are key to getting natural light into a sunken pool. Some of the construction, and then that 50-metre pool and the sculptural quality of those skylights. The cross-section showing it embedded in the earth. And this idea that this radial organisation of the structure always enables every space to be connected to the central courtyard, both for natural light but also for legibility. Another view of the skylights, the sculptural quality of the skylights over the 25-metre pool. Kids learn to swim pool, also showing the datum where the precast and in situ join. And the kids learn to swim pool, again, kids play pool, linking back into the courtyard. All spaces we tried to give natural light to, indoor change rooms, outdoor change rooms, and then a sense of that fence and the ring from the 50-metre pool, creating a kind of borrowed landscape where you could see the extension of the park from that sunken court. Spaces for school functions and swim meetings. And this really tried to capture the kind of hedonistic quality that we wanted to create with the pool, recognising that it's 25 metres from the coast. It almost had to function like a de facto beach for the community, enabling all those things of that sort of social gathering around pools, that just sort of general enjoyment of water, and some more views of that lawn area. And then creating these kind of, within the sunken landscape, this space using a disused or a recycled construction waste to create this kind of aperture for the courtyard off the cafe. And we're very interested in the idea of microclimate, creating spaces through the kind of sunken court that you could sit in your costume in the summer, and also creating this rain garden that will in time shade the spaces in summer. McGregor Coxall's drawing of that rain garden, and the gymnasium, which we really tried to imbue with a quality for a public building you would typically only see in a private gymnasium. The change rooms, the gym itself, and really trying to design it so that it could have this kind of functional flexibility where it could be actually used for things like conferences, recognising the challenges that local councils have, both with the operating and initial capital costs for these projects. Some of the local First Nations iconography developed with the Darug elders. And trying to get this very kind of, this quite kind of filigree quality to the gymnasium facade, you know, carried out at a much larger kind of scale, which gets this sort of emerging transparency at night. And then the fence acting as this kind of public disguised within the ring that creates a public promenade, and that view back into the pool from the public realm. And this idea of a kind of reciprocal spectacle between the pool and the emerging city of Parramatta, and our team, who I'd love to thank. And finally, a view of this kind of aperture to the sky, another element within the project that captures that kind of circular iconography. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a brilliant project and very chic inside. I mean, everything is very well organized. But I wonder, I mean, I have a question mark on my mind. What makes you to choose this geometrically perfect circular thing? I mean, specifically in a land like this, because there's no reference there about this perfect ring, let's say. And I'm curious about the former situation of the land. Was there any tree there before the construction? And what was the reason of changing the old project? I couldn't catch this moment.
Sure. Yeah, I can answer those things. So it was a very controversial political move, but the state government demolished the previous pool, which was a much loved pool, and to build a new stadium. And so this was replacing the pool that was demolished for the stadium. Mm-hmm. Part of the quality of that pool was this characteristic of a lot of war memorials built in Australia in the 1950s, was it had a large lawn area around the pool. So we wanted to kind of recapture some of that quality of the lawn area. And so when we developed the circle, it just seemed to be working on a lot of different fronts in terms of the legibility, in terms of making this kind of really clear, I guess, aperture to kind of view the park beyond. As I said, this idea of reciprocal spectacle between the emerging city and the park. And to give you another context, Parramatta in Western Sydney is not an area often recognised for distinct architecture.
Okay.
And so we were also trying to bring this kind of dialogue of the presence of architecture within Parramatta, which was something that was very important to people, you know, to many kind of clients in Western Sydney.
Thank you.
Well, I suppose then also related to the climate of the area, you know, then you make this circle, but part of the function is almost underground. You know, we just cover. So I think that's maybe have an impact in terms of the performance of the building, especially that climate. You know, it's kind of sometimes hot, and you need to be repaired from the sun. So I saw that like looks like an open parasol. So there's no parasol, but it's covered and protects and something like this.
I mean, we were interested in both ends in terms of, you know, this idea, this kind of tradition in Australia of just in winter being able to be just in your costume in the sun. A lot of people just enjoying that kind of hedonistic quality of it. So the sunken court really gave you that sense of wall, that kind of windbreak to just really enjoy the sun, but at the same time designing it so that it didn't feel too kind of submerged, and you had that kind of borrowed landscape of the park around it. So it was really like something we tested in 3D, getting just the right kind of, how much to kind of submerge the scheme was a key kind of element that we kind of worked on a lot. Yeah. But we were also interested in retaining the outdoor pool as the primary identity of the centre, compared to the ones I showed you in that particular slide, where most internal aquatic centres really kind of lose that connection to landscape.
But also, like you said, the Parramatta identity is quite, is a new part of Sydney, you know, it's, so maybe this gesture is not to add another language, but be more part of the landscape, you know, because it's kind of chaotic area of buildings. Which
and given the UNESCO heritage status of the site, how to minimise building footprint was a key consideration.
Yeah. Can you explain a bit more? You mentioned earlier that 10,000 square metres for cars, 400 cars roughly.
Yeah.
You didn't show anything about the resolution of that within the landscape. And secondly, your discussion, investigative discussion earlier about fences, And this is a public park, and is it a public swimming pool, or do you pay to go to the swimming pool?
Yeah, you do pay to go. It's a public pool in the sense that it's a local council pool, but you do pay to use the pool. But there's also the fundamental safety issue of how do you make that point of separation between the pool and the public. And so, interestingly, we were just finishing, or we had a pool under construction when we were designing this, and it was this enormous frustration of mine how much it compromised the relationship, that kind of continuity of park and pool that we're trying to create. So we really wanted to kind of embed the fence right into the kind of key concept of the project, and that's why we integrated it into that circular ring.
Because I noticed that there's no shading for the cars, so that people come back into ovens.
Yeah, well, I mean, this project did get kind of rationalised. At one point there was underground parking, then we were going to have a solar array over the car park
Or is this,
to provide
this is
shading.
budgetary rationalisation?
Yeah. So, but I mean, it's a point well made, and also the landscape has grown significantly since then, including trees in the parking. But it's a valid point. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that lovely presentation.
Okay. Cheers.